Do you believe that media are the enemy of the people?
Yes, because I've seen it with my own. I've seen it with my own eyes, how they lie.
We're right behind them, regardless of what the swamp or the fake news says.
Small sample of what we heard from the crowd, Donald Trump's rallies just this week. The message took root back in 2016 on the president's Twitter feed, but the message has evolved over time.
A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people. If you want to discover the source of the division in our country, look no further than the fake news and the crooked media. They are very, very dishonest people. Fake news. But they can make anything bad because they are the fake, disgusting news.
Also, importantly, let's not forget this one from just a few days ago.
What you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening.
With us to talk about it tonight, Jon Meacham, Pulitzer Prize-winning author and historian. His latest book, and it's an important one, is The Soul of America, The Battle for Our Better Angels. Jon, these talking points we've just heard the president make, why is this more pernicious than just another Trump thing?
Well, he is actively making the working press a target of the wrath of people in physical proximity one to another, which is a really remarkable thing. As you mentioned, every president, beginning with George Washington, who almost did not stand for re-election, I won't say run because nobody ran against him, but almost decided not to seek a second term because he was so tired of being criticized. So this drama starts in 1792 and presses forward. What's a little different is that we used to have to at least hear from aides, or in the extraordinary case of the Nixon tapes, we would hear Nixon himself denouncing the press. We would hear about the unhappiness of presidents, usually in the most casual kind of remark, offhand or a leak. This is a case where the president has turned the working media into a permanent foil, a political enemy. And so he's basically, in the tribalized culture of the moment, he has said the media is as much an opponent of ours, meaning him and his base, as the Democratic Party or those who oppose on policy grounds, which takes the role of a free press and puts it in really significant jeopardy, I think.
Jon, you know this next question is coming, and that is, what if we need to say to the American people, no, this next portion of the story is getting consequential for our country, for our presidency and our Constitution, and this isn't fake at all. In fact, it hasn't been more real.
Well, it's the perniciousness of the strategy. He has wounded the messenger. He's opened fire on the potential outlets that will be the means by which any damaging information will come to the people. So in that sense, it's as strategic as anything he does. And, you know, you talk to people who know the president, and a lot of them will say, you guys overthink this. He's just making it up. He's just rolling with whatever comes to the top of mind. But as you just played, this is a consistent theme. And I think what he's done is attempted to, and I think probably pretty significantly to an effective degree, he has wounded the means by which Director Mueller's report will be reported to the people, and Lord knows what else.
Bret Stephens has written a chilling op-ed in the New York Times tonight. No one's ever going to accuse him of writing unthoughtful pieces. This one, he kind of gives a recitation of a death threat he got on voicemail. And the column ends with, "We are approaching a day when blood on the newsroom floor will be blood on the president's hands." Jon, I don't think that's an overstatement. I think it's feeling just as serious as you've portrayed it tonight.
I think so, and one of the things about history is when we look back, we often see things in an inevitable progression. When we look back at Dallas, 1963, we remember that the Johnsons were jostled. People spit at Lady Bird from the John Birch Society, from the right in Texas. We see that Adlai Stevenson, then the ambassador to the United Nations, was attacked with placards at a rally. All we can see in retrospect, all leading up to the tragedy of Dealey Plaza. I fear, and I pray that I'm wrong, that you could be playing the tape you just played a moment ago, the sequence, when in fact something terrible happens. And words have consequences, and words from the very top have the most far-reaching consequences.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.